Welcome back to Off Leash. I'm Erik Prince, and today our special guest is Dr. Jack Wheeler. We've been talking to him about his lifetime of experience and adventure. He is the closest thing to the real-life Indiana Jones I've ever met. We've talked about his life background. We've talked about his time really in his travels in really helped creating the Reagan Doctrine, all the ways that the U.S. could push back on Soviet communism. And now I think it's time to talk about what America faces in the present and how we've been living through another version of the Carter administration, our foreign policy setbacks, et cetera. And Jack, who do you think the main opponents of human freedom are today, and what should we be doing as Americans about it?
Well, the main opponents of human freedom or American freedom in America, I have to say, it's the Democrat left is the main opponent of freedom. Look at what they're doing to our country, destroying our culture, destroying our schools, destroying our military, and certainly not destroying our borders. Have been destroyed. They don't exist anymore. And who would do that to their own country is something that I find very hard to grasp, except there's the reality of it. And that's the way it is.
Jack, have you ever seen, you're a great student of history and cultures. Has there been any other corollaries to other countries where their borders erased and they lost their way culturally? And what happened to those societies?
This is kind of become a cliche to compare us to the Roman Empire. The Romans got tired of fighting for themselves, and so they invited in all the Germanic tribes to fight for them, and of course the Germanic tribes took them over. But really, history does not repeat itself any more than anyone's life repeats itself. History is what the term is stochastic. It is a series of unrepeatable events, just like everybody's life is a series of unrepeatable events. If you went back in time, you'd meet other people and do something different, and you could never repeat the same sequence. And the same thing, that history is just a collection of everybody's life. So, different circumstances. My own reason, and I'm writing a book on this, and we get into it in some other time. But what all the great problems or tyrannies of modern times, whether they be communism or Nazism or fascism or even Islamic terrorism, they're religions of envy. They're communists envious against the bourgeoisie, the capitalists, and Nazis envious against the Jews. Nazis and communism are just those rich exploitative Jews, those rich exploitative capitalists. You just change the terms, and it's the same thing. The rich exploitative West with Islamic terrorism, not all Muslims, but the problem is that one of the great really visceral fears that all peoples have, and I know this from being so many different countries and living with so many different tribes, is the fear of being envied. The fear of being envied is really, really deep. And there's a tribe in the Amazon called the Yanomamo, and they when a woman gives birth to a child, she calls out so everybody can hear, "Oh, my baby is so ugly. Why have the spirits cursed me with this ugly, ugly baby? Oh. That's so everybody in the village will be sure and hear her and not be envious for her happiness with her beautiful child." The fear of envy is really, really, really deep. And so, what motivates anybody on the liberal left, not the hard commie left, because that's envy, but what motivates all these the white people, white liberals who are always apologizing for white supremacy and your white privilege and all this other gobbledygook, is the fear of being envied. And so both envy and the fear of envy, the fundamental characteristic of it is masochism, because envy and the fear of envy is characterized by the willingness to screw other people, if you're auto-racist, to screw yourself, okay? But the willingness to screw yourself if your other people are hurt. That rich SOB driving that Cadillac, take away his Cadillac. Nobody should make enough money to buy a Cadillac. That deprives you of any chance of making the money yourself and having a Cadillac of your own. You're willing to screw yourself if other people are screwed. That is the left. And that is what is going on with this kind of deep, visceral fear of being envied dominating the left, and especially the white liberal left that hates themselves because they're so afraid of being envied. That's our big fundamental problem. Internationally, it's another matter.
But the key issue, you said they're afraid of being envied. So
that's right.
That means they're fearful. They're just
that's right. The fear of being envied.
And because someone will take
what drives
the
left.
Is it because they achieved their status illegitimately? Is that what we're seeing with the nonsense around university professors, university presidents plagiarizing and all of that the credentialed class is so afraid of being discovered for being frauds that they cover it up, they project, or they overcompensate?
Well, if somebody who earns it tends not to be subject to this, they know they have a pride in themselves because they know what it took to do. That's why people who have inherited money are always on the left. That wife of, help me out, the guy Ray Kroc, who started McDonald's, and she ends up with all this money that she didn't do a dime to earn, and so she donates all these leftist causes. How many times do you see this? The kids and the rich inheritors of wealth, like a Teddy Kennedy, for example, is another example. Why he'll always be, don't envy me because look at all I'm doing, and he feels that he never earned it. If you feel that you earned your money, you earned it, why then you tend not to be afraid of envious people. But if you know you haven't earned it, like the woman in Harvard, this Claudine Gay, she didn't earn anything. She's a fraud, and she knows this. And so, I'm a victim. Oh, it's all racism. You hate me because I'm black. We could care less if you're a black lady. You're a fraud, period. I mean, come on. So if you have earned your wealth, the one exception that puzzles a lot of people is the Jews, because Jews they can be very, very successful and have earned every single dime that they have made, and yet they're still on the left. Why? Because there's no people on the face of this earth that the envy has been directed at more than the Jews. Nobody. That's pogrom city, and so
Sure.
They'll do anything. They'll just say, "Look, buddy. I mean, I'll vote for Democrat. I'll be woke. I'll go DEI. Whatever you want. Just don't envy me, because that's
right. Don't come after me. Right. We know there is a truly millennia track record of anti-Semitism and pogroms and all the rest.
Right.
I find it very, American Jews, even very wealthy ones, are very different than Israelis.
Yeah, Israelis
Because
earned
the
it, boy.
Israelis are more, but because they earned it, right? That whether
Right.
they're serving the IDF or they're living with the reality, they're living with the high probability of consequences, whether it's rocket attacks or terror attacks or whatever. So I find their living philosophy much different than Jews in the United States. So,
Right.
but knowing what's possible with influence operations and covert actions and all the rest, because of some of the things even that the United States did to the Soviet Union, how much of the nonsense in today's culture our tilt towards chaos, really, how much of that is foreign sponsored or foreign promoted, amplified by either a pissed off Russia or a Chinese Communist Party that wants to take out its major rival on the planet?
Well, there are certainly two different issues with Russia and Putin. The Soviet Union was simply a using Marxism, or what they called Marxism-Leninism, as an ideological rationale to regain the Russian imperial empire. And that's what Lenin did, and that's what Putin wants to do. That's why he said the Soviet Union, its collapse is the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century, is because Russia got their empire taken away, and he tries to get it back, and he's trying to get it back in Ukraine. And whereas China, it sees the United States as their actual enemy that they want to take down. And they are making every effort that they can. Primarily, at least one of the main ways is let's call it what it is: murdering 100,000 Americans a year with their smuggled in fentanyl, their fentanyl drugs and their meth drugs. They don't smuggle in the fentanyl itself. They smuggle in the chemical constituents to make it from China to Mexico with a deal with the Mexican government and the cartels, and then primarily the Sinaloa cartels up in the Sinaloa mountains. They have their labs and they make it and then smuggle it in. And any president who wants to defend America should be sending in Delta Force teams into the Sinaloa Mountains and blow those labs up. Just blow them up. And anybody who gets in their way, cargo 200. I mean, good night. So we're not doing anything about it. Why, I do not know. But China is a very, very serious threat. And the thing is, we're not going to get rid of China like we got rid of the Soviet Union. It was not a surprise to see it disintegrate, to collapse. And it will be no surprise when Russia loses in Ukraine and proceeds to disintegrate itself. There'll be a Russia, but it will be far smaller. It'll be shrunk because there's very large chunks of Russia that are not Russian, and they want Das Vidanya. We're gone. We're done this. And whether it's in the North, we talked about this, North Caucasus or Middle Volga or Siberia, and Siberia is another key area we should talk about.
So yeah, China has claims for a bunch of eastern parts of Russia, the maritime provinces, the port that is Vladivostok, used to be Chinese.
Vladivostok and Nahadka, and the oil-rich island of Sakhalin to the north.
Right.
That all used to be.
Folks, that's well north of Japan, claimed by China.
Right. Right. That's a big island. If you look at where Japan is, and then right to the north is this big island up there. It belongs to Russia. That's Sakhalin. But it used to belong to China and belonged to them for a long, long time. But in the 1850s, China went. They collapsed. The Qing Empire had its internal wars, and so Tsar Alexander II just marched in and said, we want this to be ours now, so sign here, and,
Right.
and
So he
they
took
did, and he
but
took
China,
it.
but China has also the habit of coming together under a strong leader, emperor, dictator, or fragmenting apart into other constituent parts. Because
That's
China
true.
is not all Han Chinese.
Boy, is that the
What does
truth?
so right? So Tibet, not China. Was not part of China for centuries. Um,
Inner
uh,
Mongolia,
Inner
uh,
Mongolia,
and what they
Xinjiang
call
up in the northwest,
Xinjiang province.
Xinjiang. Yep, those
I've
are
got
ethnic Turkic people.
I've got I don't know how many tens of thousands of kilometers, all over these areas: China, Tibet, Xinjiang, Inner Mongolia, China, etc. As you just said, Xinjiang province. That's all Western China, far west. Why, as you said, they're Turkic. They're Caucasian, Turkic, and Islamic, and they don't want any part of China, and that's why the Uyghurs, the predominant ethnic group among them, are being genocided. There's a gulag there, and et cetera. It's a
And
terrible,
I
terrible
understand the
human rights
Chinese have
thing.
even implemented like a prima nocta, like the English used to do to the Scottish Klansmen, basically trying to
Ooh,
breed it,
yes, right.
even trying to breed out
That's right.
Uyghurs
Yes,
to merge with Han Chinese
that's right.
to Sinify it.
Right.
So what if look? I know that a lot of America's wounds are self-inflicted, but I do believe, as you said, whether it's fentanyl, whether it's information programs, and a massive intelligence gathering apparatus in the Confucius Institutes
Mm,
and these massive amounts of students they send to the United States to take our IP and to go back to China with it.
that's right.
I think the next administration needs to have a much more Reagan-like, even more than Trump started with a lot of tariffs and he pushed back. Biden has been vacillating on a lot of these issues. The next administration needs a much tougher stance to push back and to maybe let China come apart at the seams instead of us coming apart at the seams. It's to me, it's a opinion. It's a contest for which governance system wins more
Uh,
human freedom or less human freedom.
well, the economics plays a tremendous role in this. Um, China is in trouble economically. Foreign investment is not coming in the way it used to. Apple is pulling out and trying to have move its research and sources of manufacturing elsewhere. The property scam that has been going on, where it's a virtual pyramid scheme where everybody's put their money into property development on these ghost cities, and then nobody buys them, and then where's the money?
Yeah, you have a
The,
huge amount of the national savings of the Chinese tied up in real estate schemes, exactly like you're saying, and there's nothing there.
there's
It's
nothing.
zero.
There's nothing there, and we talk about our debt, which is horrific. I mean, it's horrific. That's a whole other can of worms. Okay, 34 trillion. What's our GDP? 27, 28. Okay, so that is over 100%, but not by a heck of a lot. China's debt to GDP is almost 300%. I mean,
Yeah,
that would be like if we had what 80 trillion, 90
yeah.
trillion in debt. I mean, how would that work? And so China has a lot of vulnerabilities. And one way they're going to want to get out of it, by the way, everybody talks about war in Taiwan. I'm not sure about that because, there's 100 miles of ocean between China and Formosa. That's a lot of water. It's, how do you get there?
Well, yes,
I'm sorry. What I was going to say is what I think they're going for instead is Chinese Siberia. They are rooting for Putin to lose in Ukraine. And once the Tsar has lost, why Russians get very vitriolic. Yeah, they get very revengeful. Putin is gone and Russia starts to come apart. What's going to happen to Russia is the same thing that happened to the Soviet Union. It's going to end up in pieces. And one of the biggest pieces that China wants is Eastern Siberia, right north of their area of Manchuria or northeastern China, that huge area where there's got plenty of resources and oil and water and land and timber and everything else. Whereas in northeastern China is hardly any water and it's pretty barren. And so they're going to make a move, and Xi thinks that once we get that, it's going to help revise our whole economy. He's got this whole shtick going. We'll have to see how that plays out.
You were saying that the Chinese government actually has direct trade relationships with some of the oblasts, some of the effective state or regional governments in that area, not running through Moscow.
More than that, actually, there's a very, very interesting article. We're a little dating ourselves here, but this is today the 6th, and if you look up the Daily Mail, it's a London Daily Mail, they've got an article about the coming war in the Arctic, or the trade war, or the contest, or and that Russia's winning, and they don't understand what China is doing. They're talking about the trade route over the top through the Arctic Ocean, over the coast of Russia, which is far shorter to get goods from Europe around to China. China, an oblast is a Russian, kind of a county or state or something like that. Well, you got republics, which are larger, but then you got these other things, okrugs and stuff like that. But at any rate, the government oblasts along the Arctic Russian coast, China is developing trade relations with them. They're getting lots of money here. They're paying off the people and making friends and everything else. And they're making their way. Right. Yep. And the same thing with a region in central Russia. This is not a long ways away from Moscow, but in central Russia, about the Volga River, and the Volga River runs through this area in central Russia on its way to the Caspian. And
goes all the way to the Caspian. Yep.
Right. But that area, the middle Volga, that is all Islamic. Those are Muslim places like Udmurtia, Bashkortostan,
Dagestan.
No, that's in the North Caucasus. But Bashkortostan, Udmurtia, Mariel, and Tatarstan, they have oil. Yep. They have oil, and Chinese are in there doing business and putting the government players on the payroll and everything else. They are in like Flynn all over the place. Yes. Now, they are also doing in the North Caucasus too, as you mentioned, in Ingushetia, Chechnya, Dagestan, which has a lot of oil, etc. That area way in South Russia, north of the Caucasus Mountains. Okay, and south of them are countries like Georgia and Azerbaijan. So yes,
To
all
me,
these places are going to go.
The 50 or 80 million Chinese males that have no prospect of marrying a female because of sex selection abortion and the single child policy is causing this Chinese manpower to disperse. You see it in Africa, you see it in South America, even in the middle of Russia.
Right, especially in Siberia, especially that area, Khabarovsk, Nahatka, as you say,
But
Vladivostok.
the fact that, and I think as Xi even tries to clamp down harder inside China on any kind of entrepreneurship and property, et cetera, you're going to see more and more of that Chinese diaspora spreading everywhere.
Very good point. Very good point. They're moving into an area called directly north of Mongolia called the Transbaikal. Trans means on the other side of it. So it's east of that big lake called Baikal.
Yep.
And that whole area is ethnically Mongol, actually. And so they are buying land, Chinese are buying land, marrying local women, as you say, farming. It's sinifying it. They're absolutely.
Look, to me, I think the great tragedy of what happened in the Trump administration was the Democrats getting away with a lie of the Trump-Russia collusion nonsense, and it prevented Trump from making some kind of a diplomatic deal with Putin that would have been, I don't know that Russia would have ever been our friend, but they didn't have to be our enemy, that we could have come to a better level, call it Glasnost 2 or something, to pull Russia away from any kind of orbit or dalliance with China. Because I think Russia's long-term interest culturally is with the West. We have far more in common with them culturally than we do with China or India or Korea or Japan. And that's with 4 years and the 4 years of damage that have happened under Biden, or 3 years. It's an even more complex to unpack right now. But
I think there's a lot to what you
American
say.
Policy, but American policy for years was focused on keeping Germany away from Russia's resources strategically.
Well, Reagan, Trump made that call, remember? And the Germans laughed when he said, you guys are making a mistake. Don't buy their gas. You're making a big mistake. And they all laughed. They're not laughing now. I can tell you
they're not laughing now.
What I think we have to wait till Putin's gone to make a deal with more rational people, because Putin is not a normal person. He's a psychopath.
Yeah. And as optimistic as that might be, I don't know that who comes next after Putin is more sane or more.
Navalny might not be a bad idea if they ever get him out of jail.
So,
there's a story. Let me tell you. You may be familiar, but when George Bush became president, this is early in 2001.
So George W. Bush.
This is George II, George II. He had a meeting with Putin in Bratislava, in Slovakia. And he said, look, Vlad, here's the deal. You're going to need us. China is not your friend. You're going to need us. So let's work and we can cooperate, etc. And Putin didn't buy it because he wants to be another Peter the Great, another Catherine the Great. He's got this megalomania. So we have to wait till he's gone. And then I think there'll be people in Russia that will want to make a deal, because they've been screwed so bad by China by that time. They'll almost have to make a deal. But the prelude to that, of course, is Russia being defeated in Ukraine. The one thing that Biden and his people have done is support Ukraine, and I can't I'm fully confident that if Reagan were here, he'd be all in favor. He'd be this is exactly what we do, an exact duplication of the Reagan doctrine to support freedom fighters in Ukraine against Russian communist or Russian imperialism, and without our sending our guys who are not risking American lives. The Ukrainians are risking their own lives, and they're willing to do that like they did back in the Reagan doctrine days. So victory in Ukraine comes one.
Well, but we'll have to make that for another podcast, because I'm not sure that the Ukrainians have the manpower to achieve all of the victory that they want. And demographically, they are truly suffering.
Yeah, yes, they are.
Well, listen, thank you very much for joining me today, and have a spectacular trip, and continue your lifetime of adventures. I'm envious. I've done a lot of things, but not at the rate and
spectacular
that you have. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you, Erik. It was great talking to you. I really enjoyed it. Very appreciative of the opportunity to be here with you and to share our thoughts. It's been terrific. Thank you so much.